So the session today is all about capturing children and young people's voice within the Scottish Attainment Challenge, and also out with, because obviously you don't do something special for Scottish Attainment Challenge. The session today is being recorded, so hopefully you saw that message pop up. If you could keep your microphones off when you're not speaking, and your cameras, it's your choice whether you have them on or off, but try and be present in the learning space as much as you can. If you wish or you need any help, then please go to your chat pane into the Speakeasy Live, and they'll be able to help you through that portal if you lose connections or anything wrong with the sound. And also, if you're going to do any tweeting about us today, then if you can use the hashtag SLF22, that would be absolutely super. So without further ado, I think what we'll do is we'll get started. And first of all, I should introduce myself. So my name is Jackie Ballantyne. I'm one of the attainment advisors with Education Scotland, and I'm delighted today to be joined by Jamie, who's going to give you a little wave just now. He is an education officer for community learning and development within Education Scotland. And also, hopefully on the call today, we have Lorna Campbell, who's one of the policy managers with the Scottish Attainment Challenge with Scottish Government. So Lorna, if you're there, please say hi in the chat, because I know you were going to try and make it along today. Our session today is actually being split into 3 different parts. The first one is going to be looking at the interactive tool, which was launched back in March 2022. We're also going to have a look at some examples with Jamie about how a regional improvement collaboration could approach the gathering of children and young people views and opinions. And then we're going to have a look at 1 or 2 examples of some school and local authority approaches. And we also hope, if we can, to build in some pause and ponder moments, as I call them, with some reflective questions for you to think about and talk to us through the chat. So as I say, use that chat, comment, questions, anything at all. With Sam speaking, Jamie's going to monitor the chat, and then vice versa. When he is speaking, I'll monitor the chat. So first of all, just to let you know, the Scotland Equity Toolkit was launched a couple of weeks ago, and part of that Scotland Equity Toolkit is the section that we're going to look at today, which is about capturing children and young people's voice. So you don't need to worry about scribbling anything down. The majority of the slides we're going to look at today are already there for you. And I'll make sure I put the link in the chat for you so that you can come back to it at a later date to have a look. So we just want you to kind of relax and get used to what's going on. So the interactive tool. So the first thing we want to do actually is we're just going to do a quick poll. If you've got your phone or an iPad or something handy, we just want to know a simple yes or no. On that picture on the right, the purple one, the actual interactive tool, have you actually accessed it before this session? So if you use your phone, use the camera on it and scan that QR code, you'll get a yes or a no. And that would be great if you could do that for us, just so that we get a chance to see what has been happening. It is part of the Pupil Equity Fund guidelines. It's in there. The link is in there as well. And we'll put the link into the chat for you so you can come back to it at a later date. So I'll give you 1 minute or so just to have a quick look at that for me. Just answer yes or no. Whilst you're doing that, I will just pop the link into the chat. So it's there for you. The first one I'm going to pop into the chat is the link to the Equity Toolkit. And then the second one I'm going to pop in there is the link to the interactive tool that we're going to have a look at. Okay, that's a tech bit done. So let's go through a few of those pages then. So when you actually access the interactive tool, there's 2 pages come up. It's a bit like a leaflet. And within this leaflet, there are little buttons you can press, and it takes you to further information. And we're going to have a look at some of that just now. So there's lots of these little buttons that you click on. It's like a wee thumbnail. And the first one you click on comes to the Scottish Attainment Challenge Refresh Mission, which was launched, as I say, back in March 2022, along with the guidelines. And it just reminds us there why we actually have the Scottish Attainment Challenge and what's happening with that. Then underneath that, you can actually click on the links and you can go and have a look at some of the national groups that are there. So for example, if you were to want more information about Young Scot, it tells you there that Young Scot was launched in 2018 and that they work alongside the Scottish Government, Transport Scotland, etc. and they help to close that poverty gap as well. And then it goes through, I think about 4 or 5 at the moment. And the idea behind this tool is we can update it in the background as and when we get new information, and the information is always new and fresh for you to use when it's there. Then what happens is you click on the next section, which takes you into some of the regional groups. And some of these regional groups in place, there's a few of the likes of Falkirk, Clackmannanshire, Western Bartonshire. There's quite a few there that have shared information round about what groups they have in place just now. And again, we can update that in the background as and when people share things with us. And again, you would just click on the wee tummy of those 3 figures there, and that would take you to further information. Also in the toolkit, there are PDFs which you can access just by clicking on the documents. And we tried here to pull together all the documents to one place, from the Children in Scotland through to the How Good is Our School and the 7 Golden Rules for working with children and young people. They're all there for you. And again, you just right click on that in the interactive tool and it takes you straight to that document. The next section then has a look at, well, now that I've got some of this document in place, where do I actually start? Or where do I want to go back to refresh the information I have? And one of those documents there is by Children in Scotland, and it looks at 6 key stages to consider when you're actually planning to capture the views and opinions of our children and young people. So it tells you and takes you through how to plan and coordinate things, how to ensure you have inclusion, child protection, delivery, communication, feedback, evaluation, and next steps. And again, the link will take you straight to that document so you don't have to go looking for that. So it's quite handy to have everything in one place, which is what we wanted to do. And as I say, the link is in the Pupil Equity Fund guidelines, but it's in some of the other documents as well. We focus in as well on Article 12 of the UNCRC, and Jamie's going to look at that for us in a few minutes' time, just to have a look at it. But it very much looks at participation, listening, communicating, decision making, because at the end of the day, what we want is our children and young people not only to have their views and opinions gathered, but for us to act on them, and also for our children and young people to maybe do a little bit of feedback to Scottish Government round about the Scottish Attainment Challenge, which is affecting them in various different ways. So I know that was a bit of a whistle-stop tour, but it was just to give you a flavour of what's actually there. And again, some of you may have come across the UNCRC thing link, but again, it's taken there for you to make sure it's quite easy to access. So we're going to do a couple of minutes just for pause and reflect. So we want you to think about your journey just now and how you currently consult children and young people when creating maybe something like your establishment or school improvement plan, or how do you take account of the views of children and young people in decision making around any changes or improvement in your establishment or in your school just now. And what we're hoping, if you don't mind, is just to put a couple of things in the chat to have a little think about that before I hand over to Jamie. So I'll give you a couple of minutes to think about that. Or if you feel easier, pop your hands up, come in and talk to us. We want this to be as interactive as we can. Good, yep, pupil council, citizenship groups, IDL discussions, all great starting points. Does anyone actually do a child version of their school improvement plan written by children? I came across an example of that recently in North Lanarkshire, where the children actually created their own version of their school improvement plan, which was a very interesting one to look at. What we'll do is we'll just let you ponder on that one just now. We can come back to these questions at a later date. Jamie, I'm going to hand over to you just now. If you just tell me when you want me to move the slides on, then I'm more than happy to do that for you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Jackie. So good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, I should say. We bit of feedback there. I don't know if it's... That's better. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jamie Dungavel, and I am part of the Forth Valley and West Lothian regional team for Education Scotland. Like Jackie said at the start, I'm specifically attached to working within community learning development, which you may or may not have a great awareness of, depending on your kind of makeup of your local authority and kind of engagement the school has with that. And today I was invited along by Jackie to do an input on the youth voice approach that we are currently developing within Forth Valley and West Lothian in regards to how do we make sure young people's voices are heard at a regional level. And we felt this sort of model is quite fitting when it comes to not just regional aspects, but also national aspects, such as the Attainment Challenge. If you can move to the next slide, please. So before I go into the way that looks in a regional context, I wanted to highlight some of the more commonly known ways that youth voice is kind of considered at a national level. And some of these will be well known to the practitioners in this call, and some will be a bit more different. I think the most common one that's well known is the Scottish Youth Parliament, and again the Children's Parliament. These are well-established organisations that exist across the country to have democratically elected young people and children in positions where they represent other young people and children to express their views and also to be consulted on national elements. Beyond that Parliament model, there's organisations such as Young Scot and YouthLink, which are specifically designed to include and incorporate young people's views in programmes and also in policy. So YouthLink is the national agency for youth work policy when it comes to who the Scottish Government consult. And they're the kind of organisation that again consult young people and do this with local authorities and third sector organisations. Then you have more sort of specific national levels of youth voice, such as Children in Scotland, Children First and LGBT Youth Scotland. And these organisations are there specifically to make sure young people's voices are considered around these specific subjects, be it care, be it LGBT. And again, they incorporate young people and children's views to make sure that the advice that they give to national policy or to the specific work they do is informed by young people's voices. Next slide. So, as you may or not may be aware, all across the country we have regional improvement collaboratives. So each area of the country is split into regions, and in Forth Valley and West Lothian we have a region that incorporates Stirling, Clackmannanshire, West Lothian and Falkirk. And these four local authorities are part of this collaborative and also the plan that drives it, the strategic plan that drives it forward. The main aspects of a plan when it comes to regional improvement are, and specifically in Forth Valley and West Lothian, are around professional development, around building of networks, around that idea of providing opportunities for children and young people to enhance their sort of life chances. But again, with the limited resources that the RIC has, usually most of this is targeted towards those of greatest disadvantage or those that experience difficult life circumstances such as poverty. So that plan is about improvement within the region and about making sure that that's a possibility. Next slide. So one of the unique elements of the RIC plan for Forth Valley and West Lothian is this element of having a young person's board within it and making sure the voices of children and young people are considered from all four local authorities. And the reasons behind this are simply highlighted there: to act as a consultative body for new ideas, to ensure pupil voice and youth voice is at the central of decision making, to challenge plans and challenge policies and interventions that are in place, and generate, co-create things that are put in place as well. So it's this kind of idea that young people should have the ability to be consulted, heard, inform, challenge, and create improvement within a region. And that's part of Forth Valley and West Lothian's plan in regards to how the RIC operates. But even beyond just that specific regional approach, it links into other national priorities. So again, looking at the stretch aims, which again specifically focus on improvement within the system to reach a particular goal. There's a focus here on ensuring that these stretch aims for the attainment challenge ensure the rights and voice, our children's rights and voice and wellbeing are at the centre of curricular initiatives and developments. So young people's and children's voice should be a centre of it all. With this in mind, when this regional plan was created and developed, it was sort of discussed how do we make sure young people's voice is collected in a meaningful way. And the service that was kind of highlighted as being the best in doing that was community learning development. They were sort of highlighted as the best at adopting an approach that involves young people's voice in a really meaningful way. And this would have essentially allow the highest chances of success when it comes to the aims of the regional plan, but also naturally making sure that young people have their voices heard and have the opportunity to do so. Next slide. So what is a CLD approach? Well, if you look at the CLD Standards Council as a guide, they are the kind of governing body, a professional body for CLD in Scotland. You can see there's certain competencies within that in regards to how staff work with children and young people. Furthermore, there's national occupational standards when it comes to the Standards Council and how they implement the advice they give to organisations and local authorities that do CLD work, focusing on making sure the standard and performance of individuals must achieve a certain level while carrying out functions of regards to what they do in the workplace and the knowledge and understanding they have. If you specifically look at the occupational standards for youth work, it has a very specific focus on a range of how young people are involved. And specifically, you can see one of the ones I've included here is the ability for staff to facilitate and empower young people to have their voices heard and apply this to their own practice. Now, these standards and competencies have been here before even the idea that UNCRC would become law. So CLD have been utilising young people's voice and making sure it's implemented in a way that develops the service for a very, very long time. As such, this creates a perfect approach to making sure children and young people's voices are captured in a meaningful way. And this is why the CLD approach was highlighted as the best way of doing it in Forth Valley and West Lothian when it comes to regional improvement. Next slide. So how this looks and how we are currently developing this within Forth Valley West Lothian is we're putting together a youth voice development group, which has representation for the 4 local authorities, specifically youth work staff that have youth participation and youth democracy as part of their remit. So I've highlighted each of the kind of logos of the services that exist, and again, their associated authorities. But having a collaborative approach from these 4 local authorities means that any approach that's taken is done from all points of view and isn't singular and done in isolation, so truly done in collaboration. Next slide. When we look at the approach that we focused on, it's this idea of developing a charter and guidance for local authorities and the region to adopt. So the approach that we're doing with the charter is essentially a documentation to ensure children and young people's voice is included within the region in a meaningful, impactful and inclusive manner. And some of the key messages that surround that are highlighted below. And some of them are quite important in regards to children and young people having the entitlement to be consulted on RIC policy and practice, how it contribute to ideas and suggestions that to the RIC that inform planning, being presented information that's clear and concise, very specifically in regards to making sure it's understood, having engagement through inclusive and meaningful ways, but also supporting staff, making sure it's collaborative in the approach, and also there's an ability for children and young people to contribute items that are relevant to them and opt out. So for me, the approach that we're taking with Forth Valley and West Lothian is making sure that information makes sense to young people that are being consulted on. It's done in a way that's meaningful, but also their views are collected in a way that can be fed back up and something can be done about them. And I think that's something that, again, with UNCRC, we're making sure it's not tokenistic, because that's something that's often floated about when it comes to capturing young people and children's voices. Next slide. So this is the kind of model that exists in the Forth Valley and West Lothian when it comes to community voice structures and how they sort of interlink with one another. So I'll just explain this briefly so you can get a feel from it. You've got pupil councils, which many of you will be aware of, and sometimes these feed into community-based youth voice structures. So if you've got a learning community that is established around a school in that sort of area, you might have some sort of local group that is representation of that, the young people within that area. Then these might feed up to a local authority youth voice structure, such as a forum or a committee. And then what we're currently doing is implementing a way this can feed up to a regional level. So our youth voice development group is very much focused on supporting key staff and cascading messages down to these levels so that young people can be consulted on them. So for example, if it's something at a national level, such as the PSHE development, how that looks, young people can be consulted at each of these levels, and it can be fed up and fed down. And it's to make sure that young people's views don't sit in isolation for whatever structure they sit in either. So some young people might only be specifically interested in the development within their school and how that looks. But otherwise, some might want to be more involved and want to say, how do I do other awards, or how do I do wider achievement? How do I get more involved in that? And they can be part of that discussion. So this development group is there to advise and guide key staff how to take an appropriate approach to capture young people's voice. Next slide. So to make it successful, we have to consider some of the approaches that we'll be using. So we're looking at things such as Roger Hard's ladder of participation, which some of you may have seen, but it's this idea that understanding the different rungs of participation and how these are important. So making sure that young people are involved and it's youth-led. But again, if you slip too far down the ladder, some elements could be very adult-led, with young people having very little involvement in regards to the input or direction of change. So making things like that quite clear. And again, like Jackie said about Article 12, it's not just about having Article 12 there, giving young people the right to express their views, but how is it done? So thinking about the space in which it's done. Is it safe enough? Is it inclusive enough? Is it encouraging enough? Because young people will only, children, young people only share their views if they feel like safe in the space they're doing it. The voice, the way that their views are expressed and how that's gathered. So it's not just about asking a question or doing a survey. It's about moving through activity, through different sort of methods of engagement, through experiential learning, and then subsequently the audience and the influence as a result of that. Who are the audience we're speaking to? Who are the audience that they're looking to speak and inform, and then influence that must be given at that in regards to how it should be acted upon. And that's something through recent UNCRC state reports that show where things are currently is quite clearly highlighted, that young people feel that their views are gathered, but there's no action as a result. So we take this sort of approach in regards to how we employ it within a regional level. Next slide. So what kind of approaches are we taking to make sure this is implemented? One of the specific ways that we are doing this is in empowering staff in a way that has synonymousness across the region. So it's having this sort of charter approach, so everybody employs gathering youth voice in a similar way. So regardless if you're a community learning development or education staff or third sector, the way you gather youth voice incorporates some of these key ideologies and approaches. So empowering staff to take that forward, but also on top of that, having toolkits and resources that are in place to make sure this is done successfully. One of the ways we're looking to do this is make sure young people can be, the information that's cascaded to young people makes sense to them. So for example, if you take something national like the Attainment Challenge and want to consult young people on that, they need to understand what's been talked about. What is the Attainment Challenge? What's the point of it? What's the changes that are looking to be made? And we are making sure staff have the knowledge to cascade that down to other young people so they have that good understanding. Where we take this a step further is we're encouraging young people that are involved in this process, such as in pupil councils, youth forums, ambassadors, to consult subsequent other young people they're engaged with. So this might involve young people that are like an ambassador for something, going to a youth group or a youth club or an employability project, and in consulting young people that might have the views that we're looking to seek. And because they are doing it, they're empowered and taking that leadership role, but also going to young people where they are. And I think this is really important when you want to capture young people's voice and something specific, because if you just go to the normal sources, you might not really capture those views that you're looking to gather. For example, if you're looking to capture attainment challenge views from young people and you ask, school captains and house captains, they might not be the young people that are there and distribute the kind of view that you want to capture in regards to the kind of where the impact has been made. However, if you have those young people in that situation, go out and capture other young people's views within a school or an employability context, then the views are more impactful and more meaningful. So it generates far more influential learning in regards to improvement. Next slide. So what are we hoping to do with this approach in Forth Valley, West Lothian in regards to impact? Well, a couple of things. Each local authority will ratify this youth charter and how they gather young people's views and how it's actioned upon. Embedding UNCRC into how youth voice is captured. So again, making sure the Article 12 is there and other subsequent articles there are present as well in regards to anything that's done, be it a school-wide survey, be it pupil council, be it some sort of mentor or peer mentoring approach or peer ambassadors. Having strengthened collaboration between local authority youth voice structures and pupil councils, so there's more connection that way, but also at the same point making sure children and young people are consulting on regional national issues that are important to them. So again, how these things influence young people and children, but making sure they're consulted on them so they can see real change. But the main thing for all of this when it comes to impact is implementing the principles of this approach removes any barriers, and barriers around tokenism, miscommunication, lack of context in regards to what's been consulted, ineffective discourse in regards to talking about things and it not really going any direction, accountability of action. So young people say, we want this change. How is it going to be actioned upon? An accountability element there, and also exclusion, making sure young people's views that are not normally in part of regular youth voice structures are also considered, so that they can everything that is more inclusive as nature, and that's the sort of steps we are looking to take. Next slide. Subsequently, our next steps when it comes to how we're implementing this, we're currently at a stage of the charter is near completion. It's going to be ratified by young people and consulted by young people. Then it will go to local authority senior management, who will look to kind of cascade it within their service, be ever what that service is, but also further in education. So we're hoping that that sort of approach becomes a standardised approach. And again, taking lots of different views from different people in different situations, this will be the guidance document that we would look local authorities to use when it comes to considering young people's voice, regardless of if the topic is very local or the topic is something more national. And the approach in itself covers a lot of the elements I've already discussed. Next slide. And finally, I just wanted to highlight when it comes to how good is our school, there's how good is our community learning development, and some of the elements within this drive forward this kind of work naturally. So it's only beneficial to everybody that we do this kind of work in collaboration. But again, just some of the kind of challenge questions that we have to answer as a service, like how do we make sure that we use a rights-based approach to learner participation? How effectively do we reflect the context of learners' lives and address barriers to enable participation? How do we use learners' feedback to improve the learner offer? Some of these questions is what CLD uses to inform practice. So having CLD involved and looking to make sure youth voice is captured in a meaningful and an impactful way only makes too much sense. And that's why we're doing it in collaboration with other colleagues within Forth Valley and West Lothian, and look for it to improve other messages beyond just regional improvement and looking at things at a national level as well. That's all I've got to say. Hopefully that's not too much information, but hopefully that gives that sort of idea of how you can involve stakeholders in a way to involve youth voice, but also you can make youth voice meaningful and less tokenistic. And that's in Forth Valley and West Lothian how we look to do it. And beyond just the regional improvement, we also look to involve national information as well, and national kind of drivers as well. And the attainment challenge is one of them, and how we look to consult young people within that and make sure it's very representative. Pass back to yourself, Jackie.
That's great, Jamie. Thank you very much for giving us an insight into how children's young people's views can be captured and acted upon at a regional improvement collaborative level. And again, there's just a couple of pause and reflect questions there that you can think about as we move forward. But I am conscious of time and I want to make sure we've got a couple of minutes at the end of our session for any questions. So we can come back to those ones there. So here are some more on the ground ideas, as I call them. And as I said, you'll find a lot of these slides, and the ones that are not there yet will be there on Scotland's Equity Toolkit. And it has its own section there. At the moment, the toolkit is just in a draft format because we have to invite feedback from all our stakeholders before we can make any changes to it. So although some of the information that Jamie shared with us there is not on the toolkit yet, it will be as soon as we can move to the next stage of that. And again, as Jamie said, it helps to inform the national side of things as well through the Scottish Attainment Challenge. So within that toolkit, one of the sections is all about reflective questions, and we'll be adding the CLD questions into this as well, so you've got the multi-prong approach. But it's a good place to always start when you're thinking about, well, where are you on the journey round about capturing children and young people's voice? And especially round about the impact of COVID that's had on our children and young people in recent years. So a good place to start is with the reflective questions. And then you can actually look at some of the examples that are there. So for example, West Lothian have shared an example which they use, and this is very much based on their pupil equity fund. So a lot of the schools in West Lothian use the Bernhardt model to identify a gap, but as part of that intervention, children's views are sought, acted upon and recorded to make sure that they are part of what is going on around them. Another example you'll find on the toolkit is from Stirling. They have what's called a Social Justice Ambassador programme. And again, very much helping the children tune into that equity versus equality side of things, asking questions around about pupil equity fund and around attainment and equity. So again, there's just some examples there, and they've given us permission just to share a couple of slides from that. Also as well, participatory budgeting is a huge part of what schools do. So in some local authorities, they have either 3 or 5% of their pupil equity fund, which is given over to the children and other stakeholders to decide what to do. There's an example there from Rigside Primary School, and I think there's one actually on the toolkit from Hamilton Grammar from a secondary perspective as well. And again, it's just showing you how we go about giving that ownership to the children for spending that, and how their views and opinions are taken into consideration. So just for the last few minutes, think about, where you are in that journey, how you can think about the Article 12 of the UNCRC. There's some questions there, and again, it's part of the toolkit where you can actually ponder and think about that. And you can think and share some of your ideas if you've got any through the chat, so please feel free to put your hand up and come in and talk to us. And lastly, another example of where children's views and opinions are being sought at the moment is through our national discussion, which was launched yesterday as part of Scottish Learning Festival. And we'll make sure, we put that link in the chat for you. It's a really good example of how to go about capturing the views and opinions of our very young children through nursery and through early years establishments. So hopefully what we've tried to do today is not only take you through what the toolkit looks like, and we do hope you'll have a chance to click on the link and have a look at it yourself and explore it. We've tried to give you examples at school levels, local authority levels, and at RIC level, and also as well give you some questions to think about where to go to next. So, Jamie, do we have any questions in the chat at all? Or would anybody like to come in and share anything that they're currently doing?
There's no questions in the chat, but again, I'd be quite keen to hear from any practitioners in the chat their sort of approach to capturing young people's voice, be it for specifically the attainment challenge or broadly speaking, and ultimately what support they feel they need, because I know in my conversations in Forth Valley West Lothian with colleagues, especially some schools with pupil councils, they feel like they need that sort of member of staff that they can link into, they can give them proper guidance on how to do it in a meaningful and impactful way. So it's just curious to hear if there's examples that people have from how they capture children and young people's voice, or again, if they don't, what they feel like they need more of to provide that opportunity to ensure it's done in a way that captures voices from young people and children that they really want to hear from.
I think everybody's got shy on us.
I know everybody's keen. Mrs.
McKenna,
do you want to come in?
Sorry, yeah, I was trying to get everything off and on. I was going to say that one of the things that I think is just about, for my school, it's about creating the opportunities for everyone. It's the opportunities for children knowing that their voice will be heard, whether that be, I put in the chat, whether it be, you know, a pupil council, a citizenship group. It's the expectation of a whole staff that the pupil's voice is valued, and that these groups that are set up or these leadership opportunities that are available, you know, all of that is all about the pupil voice, and it's all about gathering that. But actually it's all about, for me, it's about real life situations. You know, it's about real life events that's happening, whether that be, you know, pupil council saying they want something changed, or whether that be a discussion about something in a classroom. So an example of that would be that listening to what children say. So one of our primary fives are involved in a project of in the environment, and they're talking about, you know, we've got a revamp going on of local leisure facilities, and the children were making things, and they started talking about, you know, wouldn't it be great to speak to somebody about this who's actually running it. And the teacher contacted local councillors, and they came in and spoke to the children, you know, and they then gathered feedback from the children. So it's that kind of real life differences. And the children, the visitors actually left saying the children gave them a hard time, which they did, but they also, the visitors said they would come back and show them how they've used the children's ideas. So I think that's really, really important, that children get the feedback that they're actually been listening to and action is actually happening.
That's so important. I couldn't agree with you more, because the whole point of what we want to do is not only capture the views and opinions of our children, but to listen to them, to act on them, and to provide that feedback to them. And at a national level, that's what we're hoping to do round about the Scottish Attainment Challenge as well. And Jamie and I know only too well some of the stories out there where the children kind of feel a little bit lost because they've not received the feedback that they wanted to. So we do hope, as you move forward and you think about your journey, you know, that you will share some ideas with you. When you go onto the toolkit itself, it gives you the chance to either contact your local attainment advisor to share any ideas. That will be passed on to myself. And if we can, we're going to add more and more examples into the toolkit, so it's there for you as a reference and an idea section as well. And Jamie, hopefully will agree to work with me just to keep updating, you know, that section as well from the CLD point of view.
Yep,
so
absolutely.
I think
and
we've.
Sorry,
Jamie.
Just add Mr. McKenna's point of view there. I can already see what you're mentioning there, specifically about how real change is made. And I think for me, and I know you're Clack manager, so that's Forth Valley, West Lothian. So I'm thinking, how do I make sure that the young people and children in your school link into the bigger picture in some sort of way? So again, that local level, like I mentioned, like local area, they're having an influence there. But again, things will be decided at a regional level and a national level. that affects their lives. So how do we make sure those views are cascaded up, and how do you make sure they're captured in a way that's meaningful? So I might reach out to yourself in regards to how, again, collaboration between the things that I've described earlier, but also how that kind of looks within a kind of school context, and how we can support other schools, because I'll know there'll be other schools out there that have young people that have the same willingness to have their voices actioned upon, but don't really know how to do it, or there's not the same drive like you've demonstrated about contacting local councillors. That's what we're looking to do in Forth Valley and West Lothian, to make sure there's a agreed approach that everybody can buy into, that helps, again, consider every young person, every child's views.
Very well said, Jamie. Thank you very much. So I'm afraid that's us come to the end of our session today. We do hope that you've managed to gain something from it. If nothing else, we hope it's left you reflecting on where you are and where you want to go when listening and acting upon our children and young people and what they have to say. Thank you for being with us today. I think there will be an evaluation form sent out, so please give us some feedback, because we need to know how to inform our next steps moving forward. So thank you very much for coming, and we wish you a very pleasant evening. Thank you.
Thank you.